Our top story check today takes us to Puerto Rico, where a U.S. Customs and Border Protection agent was killed in a shootout at sea with suspected drug smugglers. Now, two other agents suffered grave injuries, and it all happened just off the coast of Puerto Rico. Jeff Pigues has the dramatic details for us today.
The injured agents were airlifted to a trauma center in Puerto Rico while federal investigators scoured one of the vessels involved for evidence. The shootout happened 14 miles off the coast, where U.S. officials say 3 CBP agents approached the suspected drug smuggling vessel. There was a shootout in which 3 agents were wounded. 1 later died. One of the smugglers was also killed.
We pray for the family of the officer who lost his life, and we pray for the swift recovery of those who have been injured.
Drug interdictions are among the most dangerous law enforcement missions. CBP and Coast Guard patrols go through regular training exercises to try to prevent injuries or fatalities during encounters with smugglers. CBP officials tell us that there were 2 smuggling boats intercepted. Typically, the drugs are transferred from one boat to another. Today, CBP appears to have disrupted the operation and 3 suspects are in custody. Jeff Pigues, CBS News, Washington.
We'll of course keep you up to date with the very latest on that one as it develops. Well, meantime, the cabinet in Jamaica has approved the setting up, of a constitutional reform committee that will play a very key role in ensuring the island's smooth transition to a republic. Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs Marlene Malahu Forte said the body will cultivate and collaborate with a committee comprising representatives from the government and opposition, the Attorney General, constitutional law experts, including people from academia and the private sector. Now, part of the committee's mandate will be to advise and make recommendations on the shift from a constitutional monarchy to a republic, including the type of republic and the necessary powers to address Jamaica's governance challenges. Minister Malahu Forte said much of the groundwork required to move away from the monarchy has already been done through previous constitutional reviews. So this new committee will provide advice on the remaining work to be done and how the steps should be taken to implement those recommendations.
The starting point will see a focus on matters on which there is consensus, starting with those matters that are deeply entrenched.
Now, Minister Malahu Forte said the background documents which will inform the work of the committee have already been prepared.
So those recommendations of the Joint Select Committee on Constitutional and Electoral Reform, as well as the recommendations of the Constitutional Commission, will be placed before the committee for them to note, for them to look on, and for perspectives to be engaged on them.
Well, switching now to some health news, an experimental treatment for Alzheimer's disease has shown disappointing results in clinical trials. Now, this is all according to new information from the drug makers. And Mandy Gaither today has more on the drug's failures and why some Alzheimer's experts say the data may also bring some good.
In the fight against Alzheimer's disease, it was a promising new drug, but gantenerumab failed to help people at high risk of memory loss from Alzheimer's or those who were in the early stages of the disease, according to data from clinical trials.
We are disappointed, just like I know that families would be.
Gantenerumab is part of a class of injected drugs designed to remove sticky protein pieces called beta amyloid from the brain. A buildup of those pieces is a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. The drug company says this particular drug appeared to remove less of the protein pieces than expected. Clinical trials showed it didn't significantly improve brain function and memory. The company says based on these results, all studies with this drug will be stopped.
I think there is a silver lining. The drug didn't meet its primary endpoint, and that is disappointing, but it did actually help us understand more about this particular strategy
And there's still hope for that beta amyloid removal strategy. Maria Carrillo with the Alzheimer's Association says this drug just didn't remove enough to get significant benefit in patients. Right now, there are other beta amyloid reducing drugs being tested.
This is an incredibly exciting time for this particular strategy, but there are so many other strategies coming up right behind it.
For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
Now, another drug, Adulam, was approved for treatment of Alzheimer's disease by the FDA over the summer. That's despite a lack of support from the agency's independent advisors. Well, meantime, Cuba is trying to educate both residents and tourists on how important sharks are to the food chain, all while trying to boost tourism by letting them swim with sharks. Patrick Altman explains.
Usually, they are the last thing you want to see in the ocean. But sharks are the reason why we have come here to the waters off eastern Cuba. We're hoping to see the predators up close and with no cage. Local guides say this is the only place in Cuba, perhaps one of only a handful in the world, where divers can safely swim alongside bull sharks. We are taking them at their word, praying the sharks had a big breakfast. Bull sharks are considered some of the most aggressive in the world, but the ones we see seem mostly curious, swimming around me for a closer look before gliding away. Guide Lázaro says they want to teach visitors to respect sharks and to protect them.
El tiburón es la maquinaria perfecta.
The shark is the perfect machine, the perfect predator, he says. It's inspiring, emotional, and satisfying to interact with them. Marine biologists say robust shark populations are necessary to maintain healthy coral reefs. In 2015, Cuba placed restrictions on shark fishing, one of an increasing number of countries in the Caribbean to realize that sharks are not only important to the environment, but a way to attract visitors. People in the Caribbean used to commonly catch and kill sharks, either for food or because they were considered a nuisance. But more and more countries in this region are now taking steps to protect sharks. And it's not just about conservation. Shark tourism, visitors specifically coming to a country to dive with sharks, can generate millions of dollars in revenue. Just before her first dive with sharks, Canadian tourist Carrie tells us she's been terrified of them ever since seeing Jaws.
I watched the movie very young, and I was even afraid to swim in pools, let alone the ocean. So this is a challenge to overcome.
Guides spearfish to attract the sharks, but are careful to use the minimum bait necessary. They say they've never had an attack involving a client or guide, and that people who come to dive here gain a new perspective on sharks. It's the myth of the shark being dangerous, a man-eater that is aggressive, he says. Then you manage to see a shark 1.5 meters away from you, and when you come out of the water, they say, "This is the best dive of my life." The sharks we swim with are undeniably powerful and also incredibly beautiful, at the top of the food chain, but never seeming to threaten us. And they said the shot of adrenaline in your arm, they were not kidding. I don't want to admit to being afraid, but they're very impressive creatures. Creatures that there are now more and more reasons to try and protect. Patrick Ottman, CNN, Playa Santa Lucia, Cuba.